The appeals process could take years, but it only took a Boston federal jury 14.5 hours to sentence Boston marathon bomber Joe Karzhanayev to death. The 21-year-old showed no visible emotion as the sentence was read, but several survivors and relatives of victims wiped tears from their eyes. And now that the sentence has been handed down, what's next in this case? Joining me to talk more about this, CNN legal analyst Paul Callan in New York, and here in Atlanta, criminal defense attorney Pate. All right, good to see both of you gentlemen.
Good morning.
So, Paul, you first. Any real surprises in this verdict and the speed in which it was rendered?
No, I was not surprised. I mean, the jury deliberated for 14 hours in a case where essentially the defense had conceded that the defendant, Tsarnaev, had done all of the horrible acts with which he was charged. So the only real issue was the death penalty appropriate? Was this the worst of the worst kinds of cases? And given the death of 3 people, over 200 seriously injured, the carnage involved, it didn't surprise me that the jury would reach the conclusion that if ever there was a death penalty case, this would be the one.
On the other hand, Paige, you do feel that there was some surprise. You thought the defense did a fairly good job humanizing this young man, and that perhaps they would impose life.
That's what I thought. I do think the defense did a great job of humanizing him and showing that he was not the driving force behind this. Yes, he was involved, he was complicit, he killed people, but he was acting under the influence of his brother, who I think was a much worse character. So they talked about his family, they talked about his age, and I think all of that could have swayed the right jury.
So the jurors didn't buy it, but is it presumed that there will be an appeal, that he will appeal this death penalty, even though no one can forget that he scrawled a message in that boat the night that he was captured, and he said he felt jealous for his brother that he found death, and he was hoping that would be his fate too. So why should he appeal the death penalty?
Well, he's going to appeal the death penalty because he has lawyers, and that's what they do. So I anticipate you're going to see an appeal, and I think their best issue is going to be the fact that this case was tried in Boston, literally in the crime scene, where the government made the allegation that the entire city was a victim of the crime. So that is probably going to be the biggest issue that they raise on appeal.
So, Paul, why was a change of venue argument unable to be made successfully? Why was this case, a federal case, why was it in Boston when people feel so emotional, these emotional ties to what happened 2 years ago?
Well, I have to agree with Pate. I think that it's, with Paige, that I think it's a surprising decision that they didn't change venue. It's so personally affected people in Boston. And Boston's kind of, you think of it as a big city, but it's really kind of a small city. It's only about 600,000 people. Everybody knows somebody who was at that finish line that day. But on the other hand, the reason I have to disagree with Paige about whether they'll have a chance on appeal, they took this up originally before a 3-judge panel, federal panel, and that panel said no to the change of venue. Now they're going to be appealing to that same court again from this verdict. So, and I also think that had this been a case where you were contesting guilt or innocence in some kind of serious way, you could say the location of the trial made a difference. But really, on these, would it have made a difference if it was tried in Houston or Chicago or Los Angeles? I suspect, ironically, that this was the friendliest jurisdiction for people who are opposed to the death penalty.
Right,
so I think in the end, it gets upheld.
Last word, Paige.
Well, I mean, I disagree with Paul on that point. I think by the time you've got this jury, these are people that are pro-death penalty. You've already gotten rid of the people who are opposed to it. And yes, it may not make a difference for factual guilt, but for this sentence, for death, I do think it's important. And that's what they did with McVeigh. They moved it to a jurisdiction that was not where the crime occurred. That's the safest thing to do.
All right. Paige Pate, Paul Callan, thanks so much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.